Hi, I'm Russell Sturgis. I'm the founder and principal of EAP Mentor. Welcome to the third in a series of blogs that I'm doing on the 5 fundamental principles of the Enhances Awareness program in EAP Mentor. And in this blog today, I'm looking at the principle that states that healing is listening. And it's really alluding to the whole idea that healing physically, mentally, emotionally and spiritually is a direct result of a quality of listening. I want to be able to distinguish between listening that we do habitually, which is the fact that we turn up in life with our hearing attuned to programming. So in other words, we've gone through a lifetime of seeing things a certain way, and we have a filter for our hearing that's based on that programming. Now, and I'm using the word listening here to really describe the state of awareness. I'm sure you're familiar with the situation where somebody makes reference to a new car, and your initial thought is, oh no, I haven't seen that car. And when they point it out to you, or once it's been brought to your attention in terms of what it looks like, all of a sudden you see it around you everywhere, and you begin to recognise it in the traffic everywhere. And yet it had always been there, or relatively had been there, and had been driving past you, yet you hadn't taken notice of it. So our listening, or our filter that we have for how we engage life, has a lot to do with what we've been programmed with or what we're used to, and I call this habitual listening. For most of us, the voice that we habitually listen to is the 7-year-old, which is our 7-year-old, and it's the narrative that emerged in our formative years as a result of our upbringing. And of course, that narrative came as a result of what we witnessed and observed in our family, what we heard in our family, what we saw in our community and within our culture, and through our own experiences. And we sort of developed this set of beliefs about who we were and about what life was as a result of what was going on through these formative years. Invariably, for most of us, what we developed was a narrative that was around a form of poor self-worth. And it was this understanding of lack of worth that then became the filter for our listening in terms of how we experience life. Now, this is one of the really key and fundamental differences of the Enhances Awareness program, is the fact that we have a very lovely tool for helping to refine and helping people to explore what that narrative was all about. And I want to share some with you. These are some from people who have participated in the Enhances Awareness program with me over the last few years. Here's one that said, "To feel loved and accepted, I go over and beyond to prove that I am good enough." So here's somebody who has this sense that they're not loved and accepted. And so what happens is they go above and beyond what would normally be expected in terms of proving that they're good enough to be loved and accepted. You can imagine that that would get pretty tiring, particularly if the way in which your listening is attuned is to the belief that you're not loved and accepted. And it's kind of interesting what happens with these narratives is that it's become so much of a loop in our experience that it doesn't matter what the reality is. And ironically, love and acceptance could be there, but we're so used to listening to the whole idea that it doesn't, that we just keep on doing what it is that we do. And in this person's case, they go over and beyond to prove that they're good enough. And so when you know somebody's going over and beyond, the consequence of that is going to be burnout. It's going to be chronic fatigue, or any of the symptoms that come as a result of exhaustion. Another one said, to make sure I am wanted or needed, I strive for perfection where it counts. So this is a pretty clever one, because this is somebody who's not being perfect all of the time. They've worked out that they can work on perfection where they know that it's going to help them to be wanted or needed. But here's somebody whose narrative, whose story emerges through their whole life experience, where they're spending their time believing that they're not wanted or needed, and having to be perfect, having to excel in perfection in order to establish that need or want. Another one read, to be a favourite, I deny myself in order to please others. So here's somebody who sees that they're not the favourite, and so their way of being deemed to be important and their way of establishing that they're the favourite is that they deny what's true for them and try to please everybody else. Once again, you can imagine that there could be resentment, and there could be, once again, exhaustion and all sorts of things that could emerge as a result of that. Here's another one. In the absence of love that I can trust, I become autonomous. So here's somebody who has this story about the fact that any love that they experience isn't going to be trustworthy, and so they end up having to become autonomous. They end up having to survive and function in their own capacity and in their own right without the support or help or other people. And so they just get on with being autonomous, given that the expectation is that if there is love, it's probably not even going to be love that can be trusted. Another one read, in order to avoid damage to my self-confidence, I withdraw to survive. And withdrawal's a very common one, where people find that instead of experiencing the pain of rejection or not being good enough or not being the favourite, they'll often not even play the game. And so we see these people withdraw into their own little worlds, into their caves. Some people, you'll often see them get fully absorbed in the animal world, and they won't even relate to humans. So they'll find that they relate best to animals, horses, dogs. Another place where these people will go is into what I call the spirit world, and so they'll actually avoid having to deal with the reality of this world, and they engage some other world where they're dealing with spirit entity and people that aren't even seen by anybody else, in order for them to feel that they can survive and function. We each have a narrative, and what I have observed is that we can't hear it because it's become so habitual we don't even recognise that it's there. Now, I've done a lot of work with people who've done a lot of personal growth and spiritual work, and people who practice meditation and do a whole lot of these things, who continue to struggle with relationships that aren't fulfilling, with their life experience that isn't joyful, that aren't on purpose, that don't have a sense of contributing in the world. And they put a lot of effort and discipline into being able to control their environment, but the one thing that's missing is that they're not listening to the narrative and the way in which it's playing out in their lives. So one of the things that we do in EAP and with the Enhancers Awareness Program is that we actually help people to develop a listening for their narrative, for this habitual story that's been there since childhood, that I have actually seen still impacting in the lives of people into their 70s and 80s. And that is causing their disease, that's resulting in their suffering. And it's something that they've dealt with their whole lives and continue to deal with into their mature years. And of course, as we said in principle number 2, you can't change what you can't see. And so this third principle basically states that if you can really hear your narrative, you can really hear what's going on within your consciousness, then healing can happen. And of course, the fourth principle that we're going to be looking at in our next block says that when something's authentically observed, then it changes. But it requires this capacity for authentic hearing first, this ability to really listen. Have a bit of a play with what maybe is the narrative that you're running, that you've been running all of your life, that you're not listening to, that you're not attuned to, that might sit at the basis of your decision making, and the thing that's causing you to continue to feel exhausted, that might be leading to you to depression, that could have you unfulfilled in your work and in your relationships. If you want to know more about this work, please go to eapmentor.com, go to our Facebook page at Enhances Awareness program, and there you can find out more about awareness, living mindfully, and please join me when we present the fourth in our series. And until then, take care, and I'll speak to you then. Bye.